The first ships appeared over New York at dawn. Admiral Torres was drinking coffee in his office on Luna Base when the alarm started screaming. He looked at the screens and felt his blood turn cold. The alien vessels were massive, each one bigger than any city on Earth. They hung in the sky like black clouds, blocking out the morning sun. Torres grabbed his radio. "All stations, this is Luna Command. We have unknown vessels in Earth orbit. Repeat, unknown vessels over major population centers." The response came from Captain Ward on the defense station orbiting Mars. "Admiral, we're seeing the same thing. Here, 12 massive ships, each one about 50 kilometers long. They're not responding to any communication attempts." Torres stared at the screens. In his 30 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. The ships were dark, almost organic-looking, with strange patterns of light running along their hulls. They made no sound, sent no signals. They just waited. Then the broadcasts began. Every television, radio, communication device on Earth suddenly carried the same message. The voice was cold, mechanical, speaking perfect English with no emotion at all. "Humans of Earth, you are now subjects of the hegemony. Your resistance is pointless. Your weapons are primitive. Your civilization will be absorbed into our collective. Prepare for processing." Torres watched in horror as similar messages played in every human language. Chinese, Spanish, Arabic, Hindi, the aliens knew them all. They had been watching, studying, preparing. Admiral Ward's voice crackled over. "The radio, our defense grid is powering up. Should we engage?" Torres hesitated. Earth's orbital defense platforms were the best human technology could build. Plasma cannons, nuclear missiles, particle beam weapons, enough firepower to destroy a small moon. But looking at those alien ships, he felt like a child with a slingshot facing a tank. "Negative, Captain. Hold position. Let's see what they do." He didn't have to wait long. The alien ships began to move, slow and graceful, positioning themselves over every major city on Earth. London, Tokyo, Moscow, Delhi, Lagos, nowhere was safe. Then they opened fire. The weapons were unlike anything Torres had ever seen. Instead of explosions or beams of light, reality itself seemed to bend around the target areas. Defense satellites simply vanished, not destroyed, but erased, as if they had never existed. The orbital defense platforms lasted 3 seconds longer before they too disappeared into nothing. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Hayes at the sensor station. "Admiral, the energy readings are off the charts. These weapons are manipulating space-time itself." Torres activated the emergency channels. "All Earth forces, this is Luna Command. You're authorized to engage hostile targets. Pete, engage. At will." The response was immediate but futile. Fighter jets screamed into the sky from every military base on Earth. Missiles launched from submarines hidden in the deep ocean. Everything humanity had built to defend itself was thrown at the invaders. The alien ships didn't even slow down. The fighter jets were caught in the same reality-bending fields that had destroyed the satellites. The missiles simply stopped existing. When they came within range, in less than an hour, Earth's entire military was gone. Torres felt sick. He had sworn to protect his planet, and he was watching it fall without being able to fire a single shot in return. The alien ships hung over, the cities like vultures, waiting. The second broadcast came 6 hours later. This time, the voice belonged to President Martinez. "My fellow citizens," the president said, his voice shaking. "After consultation with world leaders and military commanders, we have decided to accept the terms offered by the hegemony. Further resistance would only result in unnecessary loss of life. We surrender." Torres turned off the communication channel and put his head in his hands. Around him, the bridge crew sat in stunned silence. Lieutenant Hayes was crying quietly at her station. Admiral Captain Ward's voice came through the radio. "What are your orders?" Torres looked up at the screen showing Earth. The alien ships were already lowering smaller craft toward the surface. Thousands of them, like metallic insects, swarming toward their prey. "Captain, take your ships and head for the asteroid belt. Use the mining stations as cover. Don't let them find you." Sir, we can't just abandon Earth. We're not abandoning anyone, Torres said firmly. We're staying alive so we can fight another day. Someone needs to survive to tell the galaxy what happened here. Over the next 3 days, Torres watched his world die. The aliens moved with cold efficiency, herding humans into processing centers in every major city. They separated families, loading adults onto transport ships, while children were taken to different facilities. The aliens called it integration and education. But Torres recognized it as slavery. The invaders were not one species, but 3 working together. The first looked like walking crystals, their bodies made of some kind of living mineral that pulsed with inner light. They seemed to be the engineers, the builders of the terrible weapons. The second species moved in perfect unison, thousands of individuals acting as one mind. They were the soldiers, the enforcers. The third species was the most frightening beings, made of pure energy that could take any shape they wanted. They were clearly in charge, directing the others with silent commands. On the 4th day, Torres received a final message from Earth. It came from Dr. Martin, a scientist who had been working on secret government projects. Torres, if you're still out there, listen carefully. They're taking us to other worlds, scattered across the galaxy. Some for labor, others for breeding programs. They've done this before, to dozens of other species. Found references in their data systems. The hegemony has been conquering worlds. For thousands of years, transmission was cut short by the sound of alien weapons. Torres never heard from Dr. Martin again. As Torres prepared to leave Luna Base, he made a recording. His words were simple, but filled with determination. To any humans who survive, to any aliens who might be listening, remember this day. Remember that the hegemony came not as liberators, but as conquerors. They took our world, our people, our children, but they made one mistake. They let some of us live. And as long as even one human draws breath in this galaxy, we will never stop fighting. We will never surrender. We will never forget. Torres destroyed Luna Base rather than let it fall into alien hands. As his small fleet disappeared into the asteroid belt, Earth grew smaller behind them. But the fire of resistance was already burning in human hearts across 1,000 worlds. 5 years had passed since the fall of Earth. On the mining world of Delta 7, planet the humans had nicknamed Dustball. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead and looked around the underground workshop he had built. The room was hidden. Beneath the official mining tunnels, carved out by hand over 2 years of careful work, Marcus had been a construction foreman back on Earth. Now he was officially prisoner 4471, assigned to extract rare metals for the hegemony's war machine. But in secret, he was something much more dangerous, he was learning. The alien overseers never came down to the deep tunnels. They stayed on the surface, monitoring production through automated systems. This gave Marcus and his team the freedom they needed to explore, to study, to plan. "Pass me that crystal fragment," Marcus said to his assistant, a young woman named Lisa who had been a computer programmer before the invasion. She handed him a piece of broken hegemony technology they had scavenged from a damaged mining robot. "Any luck figuring out how it works?" Lisa asked. Marcus held the crystal up to the dim light. "It's not like our computers at all. This thing stores information in the crystal structure itself. The patterns of light we see, they're not just pretty decorations. They're data flowing through the crystal like blood through veins." Lisa leaned closer. "Can we copy it?" "Maybe. I've been thinking about the salt crystals we find in the deep caves. They have a similar structure, if we could grow them in the right patterns." Marcus trailed off, his mind already working on the possibilities. This was happening on dozens of worlds across the hegemony. Humans were adapting, learning, becoming something their captors never expected. On the agricultural world of Green Haven, Dr. Alina ran a medical clinic for human workers. Officially, she treated injuries and illnesses. Unofficially, she was conducting the most important research of her life. Alina had studied alien biology for 5 years. Using her position as a doctor to examine the different species that made up the hegemony, she had learned that the crystal beings, who called themselves architects, were actually individual creatures, despite looking like living rocks. They could be hurt, could be killed, if you knew where to strike. The hive-minded soldiers, known as the Collective, were more dangerous, but also more predictable. They shared thoughts across vast distances, but this also meant that damaging one could affect others. Alina had even found a way to create a kind of virus that could disrupt their mental connection, the energy beings. The shepherds were the hardest to understand. They seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, which made them nearly impossible to harm with conventional weapons. But Alina had noticed that they avoided certain types of radiation, certain frequencies of light. All of this information was being passed through secret networks that the humans had built using the hegemony's own communication systems. A coded message in a work report here, a hidden meaning in a medical request there. Slowly, carefully, humans were sharing everything they learned. Meanwhile, in the asteroid belt near Earth, Captain Ward's fleet had grown from 12 ships to over 200. Not all of them were human. Word had spread through the galaxy about the species that refused to break, and other survivors had come looking for them. There was Commander Krell, whose people had been conquered by the hegemony 50 years ago. His species looked like tall, thin bears covered in blue fur, and they had been enslaved to work in the hegemony's factories. When Krell heard about human resistance, he stole a ship and brought 30 of his people to join Ward's fleet. There was also the scientist Dr. Nix, whose people had been absorbed into the hegemony 300 years ago. Her species resembled large, intelligent birds, and they had been used as living computers, their advanced mathematical abilities exploited to design hegemony technology. When she learned that humans were trying to understand alien technology, she offered her help. "Your species is remarkable," Dr. Nix told Ward during one of their planning meetings. "Most species, when conquered, eventually accept their fate. They become part of the hegemony willingly, believing it's better than fighting a hopeless war. But humans, ... you refuse to accept reality." Ward smiled grimly. "Maybe that's our strength. We're too stubborn to know when we're beaten." Professor Kim, one of the human scientists who had escaped Earth, had been working with Dr. Nix to understand hegemony technology. He had made a breakthrough that changed everything. Captain Kim announced during a staff meeting, "I think I've figured out how their faster-than-light drives work. It's not like our old warp technology at all. They're actually folding space-time, creating shortcuts through dimensions we can't even see." "Can we build one?" Ward asked. "With the right materials? Yes. But more importantly, I think I can build something to hide us from their sensors." The hegemony uses quantum scanning to track ships across vast distances. But if we can create a field that disrupts quantum connections... Engineer Rodriguez, who had been quiet during the meeting, suddenly sat up straight. "Wait, I think I see where you're going with this. If we can mask our quantum signature, we'd be invisible to their tracking systems." "Exactly," Kim nodded. "We could move our ships anywhere in hegemony space without being detected." The project took 6 months, but they succeeded. The first test was terrifying. Ward took her flagship deep into hegemony territory to assist him. With 3 inhabited worlds and a major military base, they hung in space for 12 hours, conducting detailed scans of enemy positions. Before jumping back to safety, the hegemony never knew they were there. With this new capability, Ward began launching reconnaissance missions throughout hegemony space. They mapped enemy positions, identified weaknesses, and most importantly, they made contact with human survivors on distant worlds. The messages were always brief, always coded, but they carried the most important cargo in the galaxy. Hope 2. Marcus on Delta 7. Package delivery scheduled for next quarter. Prepare receiving area. To Dr. Alina on Greenhaven. Medical supplies available. Specify requirements. To the scattered human communities across 100 worlds, you are not forgotten. You are not alone. We are coming. The hegemony began to notice small problems in their empire. Equipment failures were becoming more common. Production quotas were missed more frequently. Some of their human workers were dying from mysterious illnesses that their own doctors couldn't cure. The alien administrators assumed these were normal problems that came with managing primitive species. They had seen similar issues with other conquered peoples. The problems would disappear once the humans were properly integrated into hegemony society. They had no idea that every equipment failure was sabotage. Every missed quota was deliberate, and every mysterious illness was actually humans faking symptoms to avoid work or to be transferred to different facilities. The humans were learning to be something they had never been. Before in their history, a truly united species, national boundaries meant nothing when you were all prisoners together. Language barriers were overcome by necessity. Religious and cultural differences were set aside in favor of survival. Most importantly, they were learning to think like their enemies. The hegemony had ruled for thousands of years by being predictable, efficient, systematic, expected their subjects to be the same way. But humans were chaos wrapped in skin. They were unpredictable, inefficient, and completely unsystematic. And slowly, carefully, they were teaching the galaxy what that meant. 8 years after the fall of Earth, the first real blow was struck against the hegemony. It happened at a supply depot orbiting the star humans, called Tau Ceti. Though the aliens had their own unpronounceable name for it, Captain Ward studied. The tactical display in her flagship's command center? The depot was huge, a massive ring-shaped station that stored weapons, supplies, and equipment for the entire sector. Intelligence reports suggested it was lightly defended, the hegemony had grown overconfident after centuries of unchallenged rule. According to our sources, Ward told her assembled officers, the station holds enough advanced weapons to equip 50 resistance cells. We get in, take what we can carry, and get out before their reinforcements arrive. Lieutenant Commander? Foster, who had become Ward's best field commander, raised his hand. What about the guard force? Minimal. Maybe 200 collective soldiers and a handful of architect technicians. The Shepherds consider this sector completely pacified. Ward's expression was grim. They're about to learn otherwise. The plan was simple. A small team would infiltrate the station using stolen hegemony uniforms and forged identification codes. Once inside, they would disable the security systems and open the docking bays for the main assault force. In and out in 30 minutes, before the depot could send a distress signal. But plans never survived contact with the enemy. Foster led the infiltration team of 12 humans, all of them former military personnel who had trained for 3 years. In captured hegemony equipment, they approached the depot in a stolen transport, broadcasting the access codes that Marcus had helped them steal from the mining station. Transport 77 Alpha requesting docking clearance, Foster said into the communication system, trying to copy the flat, emotionless tone that collective soldiers used. Clearance granted. Proceed to docking bay 12. So far, so good. The station's automated systems accepted their codes without question. Foster felt a brief moment of satisfaction. After 8 years of being hunted like animals, it felt good. To be the hunter for once, they docked and moved through the station's corridors, their stolen uniforms hiding them among the normal traffic of alien workers and soldiers. The depot was even larger than the intelligence reports had suggested. Kilometers of storage bays filled with weapons, vehicles, and technology. But as they approached the security center, Foster heard something that made his blood run cold. Through an open doorway, he could hear crying, human crying. He signaled his team to halt and carefully looked into the room. What he saw made him forget all about the mission. The room was filled with cages. Inside the cages were humans, men, women, and children from a dozen different worlds. They were thin, dirty, and terrified. Some bore the marks of experiments or torture. In one corner, a group of children huddled together, the oldest no more. Then 10 years old, Foster's hand shook as he activated his communicator. Ward, we have a problem. What's your status, Foster? The depot, ... It's not just a supply station. They're holding prisoners here. Hundreds of them, including kids. The silence on the communication channel stretched for long seconds. Finally, Ward's voice came back, tight with controlled anger.
Out many guards.
More than we thought. This place is a research facility, not just a depot. There are at least 500 collective soldiers, and maybe 50 architects. But Ward, we can't leave these people. I know. Change of plans. We're going in hard. Foster's team moved quickly through the station, using the stolen access codes to unlock doors and disable security cameras. Behind them, Ward's assault fleet dropped out of hyperspace and began attacking the depot's defenses. The battle was unlike anything the hegemony had experienced in centuries. Human ships fought with a desperate fury that their tactical computers couldn't analyze or predict. Instead of maintaining safe distances and following standard combat procedures, the humans flew straight into enemy fire, accepting terrible losses to get close enough to do damage. The collective soldiers on the station had trained for thousands of scenarios, but none of them involved an enemy that seemed completely insane. Human boarding parties didn't retreat when outnumbered. They didn't surrender when surrounded. They just kept fighting, even when victory was impossible. Foster led his team toward the detention center, fighting through corridors filled with alien soldiers. The collective troops moved in perfect coordination, their shared consciousness allowing them to react as one unit. But the humans moved like chaos itself, unpredictable and wild. "Grenade!" shouted Sergeant Miller, throwing an explosive. Around a corner without looking, the blast echoed through the corridor, followed by the strange, whistling sound that collective soldiers made when they died. Foster kicked down the door to the detention center and found himself face to face with an architect guard. The crystal being was over 7 feet tall, its body glowing with stored energy. It raised a weapon that looked like a living piece of metal. Foster didn't hesitate. Dr. Elena's research had taught him exactly where to aim. He put 3 bullets into the junction between the creature's torso and its left arm. The architect screamed, a sound like breaking glass, and collapsed as its internal energy systems overloaded. "Get those cages open," Foster ordered. The human prisoners stared at their rescuers in disbelief. Many of them had been held for years, told that Earth had been destroyed, that all humans were dead or enslaved. Seeing armed humans in combat gear was like seeing ghosts. "Who are you?" asked an older man in one of the cages. "We're the cavalry," Foster replied, using a plasma cutter to burn through the lock. "And we're getting you out of here." "You said all." The pleb sent a wide Operation was taking too long. More collective soldiers were arriving, and the station's automated defenses were coming online. Ward's voice crackled over the communicator. "Foster, we've got incoming. 3 hegemony battlecruisers just dropped. Out of hyperspace, we've got maybe 10 minutes before they're in weapons range." "We need more time," Foster replied, helping the last of the children out of their cage. "These people can barely walk, let alone run. Then we make time." Ward's flagship turned toward the approaching enemy ships, even though it was outnumbered. 3 to 1. The other human vessels followed, forming a battle line between the depot and the hegemony reinforcements. What happened next entered military legend. Outnumbered and outgunned, the human fleet held the line for 47 minutes. They used every dirty trick, every desperate tactic, every impossible maneuver that human creativity could devise. Captain Creed crashed his destroyer into the lead battlecruiser's engine section, crippling it. Commander Torres used his ships self-destruct to take out an entire squadron of enemy fighters. Ship after ship died, but they bought Foster the time he needed. When the evacuation was complete, only half of Ward's fleet remained. They jumped to hyperspace just as the depot exploded, destroyed by human charges to prevent the hegemony. From learning how they had been infiltrated, the rescued prisoners were taken to a hidden base in an asteroid field. As they recovered from their ordeal, They shared stories that changed everything. The hegemony wasn't just enslaving humans. They were experimenting on them, studying them, trying to understand what made them different from other conquered species. But more importantly, the prisoners brought news from across the galaxy. The footage of the depot rescue had somehow spread through the hegemony's own communication networks. Other enslaved species had seen humans fighting impossible odds to save strangers. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy was talking about rebellion. On a world called Haven Prime, species that looked like intelligent wolves began sabotaging their work assignments. On the factory world of Industrial 7, bird-like aliens started organizing strikes. The infection of hope was spreading. The shepherds called an emergency council meeting. The first time in their 1,000-year rule, they faced a problem. They couldn't simply erase or absorb. The humans had done something unprecedented. They had shown the galaxy that the hegemony could be hurt. In their energy-based language, it's impossible to translate into human words, they discussed the threat. Some argued for complete extermination of all humans. Others suggested more subtle approaches. But they all agreed on one thing: humanity could not be allowed to continue existing. They began planning the largest military operation in Galactic history, designed to wipe out every human in the galaxy. They called it the Final Solution. But in the asteroid fields and hidden bases scattered across 1,000 worlds, humans were making their own plans. They had tasted victory, and they wanted more. 3 years had passed since the raid on Tau Ceti, and the galaxy was burning. What the shepherds had expected to be a quick extermination campaign had become something they had never experienced. Before a real war, on the industrial world of Ironheart, Commander Foster crouched behind a pile of rubble and checked his ammunition. The planet had once been a peaceful manufacturing center for hegemony technology. Now it was a battlefield where humans and their alien allies fought street by street against collective soldiers. "How many grenades do we have left?" Foster asked his second-in-command, Lieutenant Davis. 4, Davis replied, ducking as plasma fire sizzled overhead. "And maybe 20 minutes of ammunition for the pulse rifles." Foster nodded grimly. Had been fighting for 6 hours to take this one factory complex, and the collective kept sending more troops. But that was okay. The humans hadn't come here to win. They had come here to teach. Hiding in the ruins around them were 50 aliens from a dozen different species. They watched everything the humans did, learning tactics that their own military traditions had never developed. The bird-like Krell, the wolf-like Fenari, the plant-based Verdani, all of them were seeing warfare through human eyes for the first time. "Remember what we talked about?" Foster called to the alien fighters. "Don't try to match them shot for shot. Use the environment. Make them come to you." A group of collective soldiers rounded the corner in perfect formation, their movements synchronized through their hive mind. Foster smiled. Perfect formations were perfect targets. Now he whispered. The humans scattered in 6 different directions, each one drawing fire from different groups of enemy soldiers. The collective tried to maintain their formation while tracking multiple targets, but their coordination began to break down. That was when the alien allies struck. The Krell attacked from above, their natural flying ability letting them drop grenades from impossible angles. The Fenari used their superior speed to flank the confused soldiers, the Verdani who could grow. Roots, through solid concrete, tangled the enemy's feet and sent them tumbling. In 10 minutes, it was over. 50 collective soldiers lay dead, and the factory complex was in rebel hands. But more importantly, the alien allies had learned something new about warfare: that chaos could defeat order. Unpredictability could overcome superior numbers. "Good work," Foster told the mixed group of fighters. "Now you know how to hit them where it hurts." This scene was playing out on hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. Humans had become teachers, showing other species how to fight effectively against the hegemony. But the war was changing the humans too, making them harder, more ruthless than they had ever been before. On the research station orbiting binary star system X7, Dr. Alina had become something that would have horrified her younger self. Was still a healer, still dedicated to saving lives, but now she also designed weapons, specifically created to kill aliens. Her latest creation was a virus that attacked the quantum connections that held collective minds together. When deployed in an area with multiple collective soldiers, it caused their shared consciousness to fragment, leaving them confused and helpless. The moral implications are disturbing, Elena recorded in her personal log. I'm creating biological weapons designed to cause mental illness in sentient beings. Before the war, I would have called this evil. Now, now I call it necessary. Her other innovations were equally brutal. Sonic weapon that shattered architect crystal bodies. A radiation bomb that disrupted Shepard energy patterns. Poison. Gas that was harmless to most species but deadly to the dozen alien races that served as hegemony administrators. Elena's work was being copied and improved by human scientists across the galaxy. Each new weapon was tested in combat, refined, and distributed to resistant cells everywhere. The humans were learning to wage war with scientific precision, but the hegemony was learning too. It faced rebellions before, but nothing like this. Previous conquered species had fought in predictable ways, using conventional tactics that could be countered with superior numbers and technology. Humans fought like they were insane. Shepard Prime, the energy being that commanded the entire hegemony military, reviewed the latest battle reports in its crystalline command chamber. The losses were becoming unacceptable. In the past year alone, they had lost over 300 worlds to human-led rebellions. But the real problem wasn't the territory. Territory could be reconquered. The problem was that the humans were changing the fundamental nature of the conflict. Other species were starting to think like humans, to fight like humans, to refuse surrender like humans. On the mining world of Deep Rock, the local Fenari population had surrounded a hegemony garrison and were slowly starving them out instead of attacking directly. On the agricultural world of green fields, Verdani farmers were using their plant-growing abilities to create living weapons that could walk and fight on their own. On the factory world of metalworks, Krell engineers were building flying machines that could carry bombs directly into enemy positions. Every species was adapting human tactics to their own natural abilities, breeding new forms of warfare that the hegemony had never encountered. Worse, they were sharing these innovations with each other through networks that the humans had taught them to build. Shepard Prime made a decision that would have been unthinkable just 5 years earlier. They would negotiate with the human leadership, offer them a separate peace that would end the war. Some worlds would be given independence in exchange for an end to the rebellion. But when the offer was transmitted to Captain Ward, now Admiral Ward, her response was broadcast across the galaxy for everyone to hear. The hegemony offers us freedom. For some humans, on some worlds, while billions of our people remain in chains. They offer us peace while they continue to enslave entire species. They offer us compromise while they conduct experiments on our children. Our answer is simple: no. Ward's voice carried across space to every rebel base, every resistance cell, every hidden group of fighters. We don't want some of our people free. We want all of our people free. We don't want some worlds liberated. We want every world liberated. We don't just want independence for humans. We want independence for everyone. The broadcast ended with words that became the motto of the rebellion: all or nothing, victory or death. No surrender, no compromise, no peace until the galaxy is free. The hegemony's offer had backfired completely. Instead of dividing the resistance, it had unified them. Species that had been fighting separate wars suddenly realized they were all part of the same struggle. The bird-like Krell, the wolf-like Fenari, the plant-based Verdani, dozens of other species formally joined what was now being called the Liberation Alliance. The war entered a new phase. Instead of scattered resistance cells, the Alliance began launching coordinated campaigns across multiple star systems. They had learned human concepts like logistics, strategic planning, and combined operations. But they added their own unique capabilities to create something entirely new. The Battle of Trinity Nebula became the turning point. 3 hegemony fleets converged on what they thought was a major rebel base hidden in the gas clouds. Instead, they found a trap. Admiral Ward commanded from her flagship, while alien allies provided capabilities that no human fleet could match. Krell pilots flew through the nebula's gas clouds where sensors couldn't track them, guiding human ships to perfect ambush positions. Verdani Biotechnology had grown living mines that looked like space debris, but exploded when enemy ships came. Near Finari speed allowed them to deliver boarding parties faster than any defender could react. The battle lasted 18 hours, and ended with the complete destruction of all three hegemony fleets. The first time in their 1,000-year history, the hegemony had lost a major fleet engagement. But the real victory wasn't the ships destroyed or the territory gained. The real victory was that the galaxy saw the hegemony could be beaten in open battle by an alliance of former slaves and primitives. Recruitment for the rebellion increased by 500% overnight. Entire worlds declared independence from the hegemony. Even some of the alien species that had served the hegemony willingly for centuries began to switch sides. The collective began experiencing system failures. As individual members started questioning the hive mind. Some architects started using their technological skills to help the rebellion instead of their masters. Even a few shepherds, the energy beings who had created the hegemony, disappeared from their posts and were never found. Shepherd Prime realized that they were no longer fighting a rebellion. They were fighting a revolution that threatened to destroy everything they had built over thousands of years. The question was no longer how to defeat the humans. The question was whether the hegemony itself could survive. In the hidden command centers of the Liberation Alliance, human and alien leaders planned their next move. They had proven they could win battles. Now they needed to prove they could win the war. The target was obvious. The hegemony's core worlds, where the shepherds themselves lived. It would be the most dangerous operation in galactic history, with almost no chance of success. In other words, it was exactly the kind of mission that humans specialized in. 18 years after the fall of Earth, the largest fleet in galactic history assembled in the darkness between the stars. Admiral Ward stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking out at an impossible sight over 10,000 ships from dozens of species all united under the banner of the Liberation Alliance. The fleet contained every type of vessel imaginable. Human destroyers designed for hit-and-run attacks, Krell fighters that could dance through enemy formations like deadly birds, Finari cruisers built for speed and stealth, Verdani bioships that could repair themselves in the middle of battle. And at the center of it all, the massive command ships were human and alien leaders. Worked together to coordinate the greatest military operation in galactic history. Final intelligence report, announced Commander Torres, Ward's intelligence chief. The hegemony has concentrated their remaining forces around the core worlds. We're looking at over 20,000 enemy vessels, including their most advanced battleships. Ward nodded. She'd expected this. The shepherds had pulled back their forces from across the galaxy, abandoning hundreds of worlds to protect their homeworld and the handful of systems that controlled their empire. Casualties? She asked. 60%, Torres replied honestly. Maybe 70. The core worlds are protected by weapon systems we've never encountered before. Reality manipulators that can erase entire fleets from existence. Temporal distortion fields that can trap our ships in time loops. And that's just the automated defenses. Ward looked around the bridge at her mixed crew of humans and aliens. They had all volunteered for this mission, knowing the odds. Lieutenant Commander Foster, now her chief tactical officer, had survived every major battle of the war. Dr. Alina, despite being in her 70s, insisted on joining the medical team. Even Professor Kim, now ancient and frail, was aboard too. Help coordinate the technical aspects of the assault. We've come this far together, Ward told her staff. One way or another, this ends today. Signal all ships, begin the jump to Shepherd Prime. The core worlds of the hegemony existed in a region of space that defied normal physics. The shepherds had spent millennia modifying reality itself around their homeworld, creating layers of defenses that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. As the Liberation fleet dropped out of hyperspace, they found themselves facing something that looked more like a work of art than a star system. 3 artificial suns orbited around, a planet that seemed to be made of pure crystal. Energy bridges stretched between floating continents, while massive structures that might have been cities or weapons hung in space like geometric dreams. And everywhere protecting it all were the hegemony's guardian fleets. My God, whispered Dr. Nix, the Krell scientist who had joined Ward's crew years ago. "How do we fight something like this?" "The same way we fought everything else," Ward replied. Together, and with more courage than sense, the battle began immediately. Hegemony forces attacked with weapons that bent space and time, creating impossible geometries of destruction. Ships were trapped in temporal loops, forced to relive their own destruction over and over. Others were simply erased from reality, deleted from existence as if they had never been built. But the Liberation Fleet had learned from 18 years of warfare. They scattered in all directions, refusing to present concentrated targets. Human ships dove straight into the enemy formations, accepting massive casualties to disrupt the hegemony's careful battle plans. The Krell fighters used their natural speed to dodge between reality distortions. Fenari vessels employed hit-and-run tactics that kept the enemy guessing. Verdani bioships absorbed damage that would have destroyed metal vessels and kept fighting. All ships execute Plan Chaos. Plan Chaos was the most human military strategy ever devised. It wasn't really a plan at all. Every ship in the fleet had been given dozens of different objectives, from destroying specific targets to creating diversions to simply causing as much confusion as possible. The idea was that if the Alliance fleet couldn't predict what they were going to do next, neither could the enemy. The result was exactly what Ward had hoped for. The hegemony's tactical computers, designed to analyze and counter-organize military operations, couldn't cope with 10,000 ships all doing completely different things at the same time. Some Alliance vessels were trying to destroy enemy battleships. Others were attacking the artificial suns. Still others were landing troops on the floating continents. A few were just flying in random patterns, shooting at anything that moved. Commander Foster led the assault on the largest hegemony battle station. It's a massive structure that controlled the defensive systems around Shepard Prime. His boarding party included humans, Krell, Fenari, and Verdani, a combination of species that had never worked together before the war, but now fought like they had trained together for decades. "Remember the plan?" Foster told his mixed team as their assault ships approached the battle station. "Humans take the command center. Krell secure the power systems. Fenari handle communications. Verdani neutralize the computer cores." But when they breached the station's hull, they found something unexpected. The corridors were filled with refugees, members of species that served the hegemony, but not by choice. They were the descendants of conquered peoples who had been absorbed so long ago that they had forgotten they were ever free. "Don't hurt us," pleaded one of the station's technicians, a creature that looked like a walking tree but spoke perfect English. "We're not soldiers. We just work here." Foster lowered his weapon. After 18 years of war, after seeing so much death and destruction, he'd forgotten that not every alien was their enemy. Many of them were victims too, just like humanity had been. "We're not here to hurt you," Foster said. "We're here to free you. Help us shut down the defensive systems, and this war can finally end." What happened next surprised everyone, including Foster. The technicians, engineers, and workers throughout the battle station began helping the assault team. They showed the Alliance fighters how to access the most heavily defended areas. They provided override codes for security systems. They even helped carry wounded soldiers to safety. Within 6 hours, the battle station was under Alliance control. Similar scenes were playing out across the Shepard system as more and more hegemony personnel realized that the Liberation Alliance wasn't there to conquer. They were there to liberate. But the real battle was happening on the surface of Shepard Prime itself. While the space battle raged overhead, Dr. Alina led a special team to the planet's surface. Their target was the Central Command Complex where the Shepard leadership controlled their empire. Alina was old now, her hair white and her hands shaking, but her mind was as sharp as ever. She had spent 18 years studying the Shepards, learning their weaknesses, developing weapons that could hurt beings made of pure energy. "The radiation generators are in position," reported Lieutenant Hayes, one of Elena's assistants. "Once we activate them, the Shepards won't be able to maintain their energy forms in this area." Elena nodded and activated the devices. Across the Crystal City, invisible radiation began disrupting the quantum fields that allowed the Shepards to exist. For the first time in their million-year history, the energy beings found themselves forced into physical forms. What emerged from the crystal towers were creatures of impossible beauty and terrible power. They looked like living lightning, constantly shifting between different shapes and colors. But they were also vulnerable in ways they had never been before. The final battle was brief, but intense. The shepherds fought with weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics, but they were few in number and unused to physical combat. The Alliance forces fought with determination, born from 18 years of war and the knowledge that this was their last chance. When the last shepherd fell, something unexpected happened. Across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds, the oppressive weight of the hegemony simply vanished. Species that had been enslaved for centuries suddenly found themselves free. Computer systems that had enforced loyalty to the shepherds shut down. Military units that had been programmed to obey orders began thinking for themselves. The hegemony, greatest empire in galactic history, collapsed in a single day. But Admiral Ward and her allies didn't celebrate. They were too busy with the massive task of figuring out what came next. Billions of beings across thousands of worlds suddenly found themselves free. But freedom without structure could lead to chaos and starvation. The Liberation Alliance became the Galactic Coordination Council, helping former hegemony worlds establish their own governments and trade relationships. Humans, who had started this war as the galaxy's newest victims, found themselves serving as teachers and advisors to species that had been enslaved for millennia. The process took decades. Some worlds wanted complete independence. Others chose to form federations with their neighbors. Few even asked to join the human colonies that were being established throughout the galaxy. Earth was eventually liberated and rebuilt, but it was no longer the center of human civilization. Humans had spread across the galaxy, adapting to thousands of different worlds and forming friendships with dozens of species. They had learned that home wasn't a place, it was the people you chose to stand with. 50 years after the war ended, Admiral Ward, now ancient and honored by every free species in the galaxy, stood in a garden on New Earth, watching children from a dozen different species playing together. Human children ran alongside Krell, hatchlings, Fenari cubs, and Verdani saplings. They were speaking a mixture of languages, creating new games that combined the traditions of multiple worlds. Was it worth it? Asked Dr. Elena, who had lived to see her 100th birthday and the galaxy she had helped free. Ward smiled as she watched a human girl teaching a young Krell how to throw a ball. Look around, Elena. A galaxy where every being can choose their own path, where children of former enemies play together, where no one kneels to anyone else. Yes, it was worth it. The galaxy had learned the most human lesson of all, that sometimes the impossible is just another word for not yet attempted, and that freedom once tasted spreads like wildfire across the stars.